But first, as I told you, 3 things are now certain in Australia: death, taxes and net zero by 2050. Now, that doesn't mean that I advocate for the target, but just like death, which you don't want to happen, taxes, which you don't enjoy paying, this thing is going to be part of our lives. Now, one thing that I said was just as important as the 3 words of death, taxes and net zero, put a hyphen in there for the grammar police, is the cost of transition. That's what matters to Australians, not the overall motherhood statement, but the how, not the why, the how. And today we got confirmation of what we knew the second this thing started to get put into that category of death and taxes. An opinion poll was released today as part of the campaign by the Daily Telegraph and lots of other newspapers in the stable. It is a poll that had more people in it than your average news poll, which of course is the gold standard when it comes to national mood, and of course was enough to remove not 1 but 2 prime ministers. 2,421 respondents found a large majority of adults in all states, an average of 58% nationally, said Australia should switch to 100% renewable energy such as solar, wind and hydro by 2050. But there was plenty more in the poll. Now, just this one area of 100% renewable energy. Again, the CSIRO released a report, this report, that in its introduction said the cost of that is $1 trillion to be paid for by the energy companies, by new companies, and by us, the customer, by 2050. And the CSIRO is, of course, a highly trusted institution in Australia. Literally another poll that came out today, one from the Essential Group, yes, the lefty-leaning one in the Turnbull Times, it showed that organisations like scientific bodies like the CSIRO, and they specifically mention the CSIRO, that say that the cost of a 100% renewable energy system is $1 trillion, has 68% support amongst the public compared to just 48% for the institution that is our federal government. So you have to pay. But how much are we actually willing to pay? This has been the question nobody can or will answer. It is the question that has determined election after election. Not the existence of climate change, not knuckle-dragging, wanting to take us back to the 1870s, but about the cost of transition. So the same poll that showed people really loved renewables, they don't want to pay for them. Let me explain in incredible detail. Today, the opinion polling that was released today showed that in New South Wales, 43% of people are willing to pay nothing on top of what they currently do. Just 5% of people in New South Wales are willing to pay more than $100 a month. The cost of changing the electricity grid is $1 trillion. 5% of people say more than $100 a month. In Victoria, 38% of people say nothing, no extra. 3% of people say more than $100 a month. And 4% say between $76 and $100 a month. The cost of changing to 100% renewables, $1 trillion. In Queensland, 48% of people say nothing. 3% of people say more than $100. In South Australia, 48% of people say nothing. 4% of people say more than $100. The bill is $1 trillion. The CSIRO have told us that. No politician, no one on taxpayer TV, the CSIRO. In Western Australia, 43% of people say nothing, 26% of people say $25, 2% of people say between 75 and 100, and 6% of people say more than 100 a month. And just to say we're thorough here, here's Tasmania. 41% of people say nothing. 4% say more than $100. The cost? $1 trillion. Net zero, in terms of how it goes down in the real world, is as popular as death and taxes because we would like to avoid them, and particularly when it comes to the cost. Now, those who run the world have decided this is what's going to happen, which is why I put it in that case of inevitable. So rather than arguing about whether it should or shouldn't happen, let's be honest about cost of transition. That is not denial of climate change. That is not denial of a need for action. That is not a denial of a need for us to play our part in the world. But as I've told you a million times, and let's do it one more, China can produce the entirety of what we do in just 16 days. And they can continue to pollute as much as they want, double, treble, quadruple, 100 times more every single year than what they currently do till 2030. That's when they start being brought to the global standard. In the meantime, we've saddled ourselves with a bill of $1 trillion for just the energy market. Forget about the transport market, forget about agriculture, forget about everything else. That's why people don't like this. Again, not because they want to live in an era of black and white TV, but because, as we saw during the coronavirus pandemic, there are people amongst us who, the second they lose casual work, demanded to have support from government, support that came from government. Because without an ability to have a wage, the federal and state government stepped in to help pay to get through lockdown. What will the federal and state government do to help the people who can't even afford the $25, let alone the 3% of people who are willing to pay more than $100 a month? And when it comes to the different generations, mine, Generation X, same poll, bigger sample size than News poll. 43% of people say nothing. 29% of people say under $25, and just 4% of people say more than $100. For baby boomers, 56% say nothing. For the disgracefully named silent generation, who are the parents of the baby boomers, they too are 59% who are not willing to pay anything because they've already paid all the bills of their life. They are already paying bills, like their own retirement. So surprise, surprise, the biggest group that is actually willing to pay anything out of all of this are the people who don't have many bills to pay at all. They don't have a mortgage. They don't have a spouse or kids. They are literally paying for their own life. But even then, $25 should be enough for 29% of people, and 14% say more than $100 a month. Cost of transition. If they don't know, then how could you possibly sign it? If they do know but they won't tell you, guess who's going to pay? The CSIRO, $1 trillion for the electricity changes alone. But the people who run the world have decided this is going to happen. Death, taxes, net zero by 2050.